what are elements and compounds and give some differences. Also, I will teach you that why elements and compounds are pure substances. Firstly, let me teach you the basic concept of elements and compounds. Well, we know that every matter is made up of atoms. For example, consider table salt and gold. We know that table salt and gold are made up of millions of tiny atoms. Let me ask you, can we split the table salt and then gold? The answer is yes. We can split the table salt into two atoms, sodium and chlorine. And in gold, where we cannot able to split the gold into two or more atoms, as gold is made up of only one type of atoms, the gold atoms. Thus we learned that table salt is made up of two different types of atoms and gold is made up of only one type of atom. In chemistry, we call the gold as element and table salt as compound. Next, let me teach you the difference between elements and compounds. Elements are made up of only one type of atoms. For example, consider oxygen. We know that oxygen is made up of only one type of atoms, so it is an element. Secondly, consider hydrogen. We know that hydrogen is made up only one type of atom, so this is also an element. So thus we learned that elements are made up of only one type of atoms, where compounds are made up of different type of atoms. For example, consider water. We know that water is made up of H2O, which composed of hydrogen and oxygen. So this is an element. Secondly, consider sugar. We know that sugar is made up of C12, H22 and O11, where it composed of carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. So it is a compound. So thus we learned that compounds are made up of different type of atoms, and while elements are made up of only one type of atoms. The second difference between elements and compounds are there are 118 elements known to mankind. For example, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, boron and sulfur and so on. And we can classify all elements in periodic table, which was the purpose of periodic table. Where in compounds there is no upper limits on the type of compounds. For example, when we add hydrogen with oxygen, we get an H2O, which is also called as water. Secondly, when we add carbon with hydrogen and oxygen, we get a C12, H22 and O11 or sugar. Thirdly, when we add hydrogen with chlorine, we get an HCl or hydrochloric acid. So thus we learned that there are only 118 elements known to mankind, where there is no limits on type of compounds. The third difference between elements and compounds are every element is represented by symbols. For example, hydrogen is represented by H, oxygen is represented by O, carbon by C, boron by B and sulfur by S and so on. Where every compound is represented by its chemical formula. For example, when we consider water, water is represented by H2O in its chemical formula. Secondly, when we consider sugar, it represented by C12, H22 and O11 formula. Thirdly, when we consider salt, we represent salt as NaCl. The fourth difference between elements and compounds are we cannot split up the element into two or more simpler substances by physical or chemical means. For example, when we consider hydrogen and we divide hydrogen, we get hydrogen. When we divide hydrogen, we get hydrogen. So thus we learn that we cannot split up an element into two or more substances. Where in compounds, we can split up to its respective elements by a chemical means. For example, consider electrolysis process. In electrolysis process, when we take water, split the water into hydrogen and oxygen, and we can do this for every compound. Thus we learned that we can split up the compound to its respective elements by a chemical means, where we cannot split the element into two or more simpler substances. Finally, let me teach you the bonus question that why elements and compounds are called as pure substances. For example, consider gold and water. We know that Gold is made up of only one type of atoms, the gold atoms, which is represented by Au. So this is an pure substance. Secondly, when we take water, water is made up of only one type of molecules, H2O. So this is also an impure substance as it not having any other type of molecules. So to learn more about chemistry, subscribe our channel.